Hi everyone, I'm your host Isha Jain, and welcome back to the second episode of Follow in Their Footsteps. Last week, we met a nuclear physicist, and this week we'll be meeting an eminent hydrologist. She holds a PhD from Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a BSc from the University of Michigan in Civil and Environmental Engineering. Her work focuses on water's relationship to many sectors, and she also earned an MS in Technology and Policy from MIT and a postdoc in Earth System Science at Stanford University. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Anjuli Jain Figueroa, all the way from California. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'd like to start with a question that I think you may encounter very frequently, and that is, what exactly is a hydrologist and what do you study?
Yeah, so a hydrologist studies water. That can mean many things. Typically, it's water on Earth, so how water moves and changes from one form to another. A lot of people do modeling, many do field work, and the combination of that is what kind of leads to the field of hydrology.
Okay, so that's quite interesting. And what topic is your focus in hydrology?
So I do a lot of computational work. That means I try to model how water moves across the Earth's surface and moves from rivers to ocean to different sectors. My area is a lot about systems, so how water affects different systems, things like our food system, so the production of food, things like our urban systems, how much water is distributed through cities. We look at how the movement of water will be affected by climate change or by growing urbanization. So this type of systems thinking is what I bring into hydrology.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. And I mean, seeing as 71% of the Earth is made out of water, and I mean, it's one of our most basic necessities, I can infer that the research you would do definitely has a very large impact on, our world. So could you expand a little bit on how your research could be used in the real world?
Yeah, my research itself is actually very applied. So I study what's called the food-water energy nexus. And what this means is we try to understand the links between water and our other systems. It can be applied by looking at quantifying and understanding what policies can lead to a better or more sustainable development to ensure that we're using our water in an efficient way.
Yeah, I think that's really important and also sounds quite fascinating. And another question I have is, what drew you to, this field of hydrology and learning about the environment?
My real kind of driving motivation is to try to help people. Where I grew up, there were a lot of slums, and it seemed to me it was an infrastructure problem. And so if I studied infrastructure, that I would be able to help. But as you start learning, there are more basic needs that kind of underpin everything else. And so water is one of the most basic needs, and it's one of the one that leads to a lot of people both spending a lot of time trying to get water, trying to figure out how to get their crops to grow. All these things started to lead from one thing to another in terms of how can I try to help people? What would be the most impactful way for people to benefit from knowledge? And I felt that understanding water a little bit better could help.
Today we're going to be playing fill in the blank. So I'm just going to read out a sentence and you just need to fill the blank with the first word that you can think of. So science is...
Exploration.
Okay, I really like that. Yeah. My favorite thing to do on a day off is?
Read.
Any favorite books that you can share with us?
Ooh, that one's tough. I like a lot of behavioral economics books. I might suggest Thinking Fast and Slow. That's a good book, but not for your age range, I think, a little bit older. Your viewers' age range, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. If I was not a scientist, I would be a...
Oh, that's tough. I can't imagine not being a scientist. It's just I'd like to explore. I like to discover.
My favorite food is?
I like fruits. Mango.
Oh, yeah, I love mango as well. And if my life was a movie, its genre would be?
Probably a comedy.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. We actually have an audience question from a child in the Nisaba community. And the audience question is, over 2 billion people live in countries where water supply is inadequate. So why is a global water crisis happening in the world right now?
These are all causes that happen because of high density. So it's really linked to just the number of people that are now trying to get water from the same finite supply, and can be changed by both the climate and just changing patterns. So before, in places where maybe a lot of water was available, the climate may have changed to make it much drier. And now there are more people using that smaller water supply. And so you've got a place that previously didn't have scarcity and now has a lot of scarcity. And so that requires much more careful thinking of how we draw water, how we treat it at the point source, how we distribute it, how we get it to where those people have settled, and how we maybe change where people are living to try to match that with where the resources are still available.
And I'd actually like to extend the audience question a bit. So my generation is going to be one that's the most affected by, I think, climate change and water vulnerability, global warming. So are there some simple steps that you can share with me and the audience to conserve energy, save water, and basically just live a more sustainably in our day-to-day lives, just small, things that we can do?
Yeah, so maybe I'll correct the question there, because it's not something that will happen to your generation in the future. It's here. We're seeing the effects of climate change for anybody that's alive, I think.
Yeah.
And so there will be maybe technological shifts that help, but there's a big aspect of behavioral shifts. And that in many ways can be how we consume products. Every product uses water, what we choose to eat. So going back to, we've designed a system that is useful in economic terms for being able to trade things and being able to have access to produce and food that's a high value, but uses a lot of water almost everywhere in the world. We want that, we demand that, it's part of how we establish our economic patterns. But if we can eat more locally, eat things that are better aligned with the environment in the region where the crops are grown, where maybe they don't have to be shipped as far, these behavioral consequences in aggregate make a big difference. And so it's useful to start kind of informing yourself of like, what can I do?
Okay, yeah. So it was really great learning about your research and a little more about your career. Finally, let's move on to our game for today, which I called the water footprint. So basically, this game is to shed some light on the ways in which we indirectly and perhaps unknowingly consume water in our day-to-day lives. So I have a couple of household objects, and I'd just like you to guess how many liters it took to make the object. So the first thing I have is a toilet paper roll.
Yeah, so I've seen some of the ranges for this. So I think I've seen like 10 to 40 gallons for this. So somewhere in the 40 to 160 liters.
Yeah, that's actually right. So one toilet paper roll takes 140 liters of water. So for a bit of context for the audience, that's 1.4 bathtubs full of water for one toilet paper roll. Okay, next thing is a mobile phone.
I've seen, I think, the range somewhere in the 200 gallons. So something like 1,000 liters.
Actually, it's 13,000 liters. So 130 bathtubs full of water to make one phone, which is quite mind-blowing, but yeah.
Yeah, it's probably coming from the metal extraction.
Yeah, and a cotton t-shirt, just a simple cotton t-shirt.
That has a huge range. I think I've seen everything from like 700 to 20,000 liters.
Yeah, so that's right. This one was 2,700 liters, around there. So yeah. And lastly, a box of cereal.
It's another 10,000 liters.
Yep, that's correct. Around 10,000 liters is the range I got as well, especially for first the box and then the cereal inside it. So yeah, I think you did really good in this game. And thank you so much for coming on here today. Your work, it's really inspiring, and I hope that many more young people will be able to see it and get inspired by it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, something that maybe I can share that's interesting about the field, we've usually looked at people that study water on Earth, but the field is somewhat growing because we're starting to find that many other places also have water. And so it's interesting to also think of what you might be able to learn from Earth that's transferable to other planets, because water behaves very differently in space than it does on Earth. And that's an exciting field for young people as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And that was the second episode of Follow in Their Footsteps. See you next week for the third one. Bye.